Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. This is our Saturday morning microdosing group, and I appreciate each of you showing up to share a little bit about your experience and also to ask questions. So, I wanted to start out today talking about thought and talking about feelings. When we start microdosing, we always have a purpose behind it. For those of you that have been coming to group for a while, you know this is one of my favorite things to talk about. But wanted to really hone in today on the understanding that every thought that we have requires a brainwave. Every brainwave requires energy. So we are using energy to think. So my question I want you to kind of pause and consider right now is how much energy are you spending thinking about how you feel? We give a lot of consideration to our feelings in modern society. We, I just don't feel like this is working for me. I feel like this isn't something I want. I feel sad, so I'm going to act this way. I feel angry, so I'm going to act this way. I feel like somebody was trying to disrespect me, so I'm going to respond that way or have some internal dialogue about that. So, feelings are something that we are often considering, but we may not consciously be noticing how much we stop and think about our feelings. So, if we think about the sentence again, thought is energy. How much energy are you spending thinking about how you feel? So, psilocybin mushrooms will make you feel a little different initially. And that's how we notice that something is shifting. And, one of the things I say on a regular basis is microdosing is not about how you feel, it's what do you notice. But something we tend to notice initially is that we feel different. Oh, I feel a little more relaxed. I feel like my brain has quieted down a little bit. I feel like I can think and be more focused. So we have that shift initially of how we feel, but it is a misuse of the mushroom if we stay focused on how we feel, because our feelings can shift from how much sleep did we get? Have we eaten today? Are we drinking enough water? Um, for women, where is our hormone cycle? There's a lot of things that play into how we feel. How did our partner respond to us today? What are our kids doing? Or, did the dog decide to have a crazy night? And so then again, we haven't slept all night. So when we look at how we feel instead of how we notice, we're really misusing the mushroom if we're trying to use it in a way to just make us feel happy or make us feel better. That is a misuse of microdosing. Psilocybin instead is a tool that will allow the brain to push past that focus on how we feel and actually move to that true change in thinking, which is the goal. And that is really a long-term definition of what neuroplasticity is. Neuroplasticity, that big word that we hear, oh, psilocybin enhances neuroplasticity. Oh, neuroplasticity. What does that mean? It means the brain has the ability to change. Enhancing neuroplasticity means that we are enhancing the brain's ability to be able to shift and to think differently and to respond differently. And one thing that psilocybin does that's different than SSRIs and other substances out there is not only does it enhance neuroplasticity, but it actually strengthens the neural connections. So it's not just a change, but it is a physiological strengthening of the dendrites and of the neural connections themselves. So a lot of research right now that's being done with Alzheimer's and dementia and using psilocybin with those particular diagnoses and seeing how memory is impacted. And a big part of neuroplasticity and is in the same part of the brain as where memory is, which is in the hippocampus. And within the hippocampus, that is where we have the creation of memory. But that is connected also to the amygdala, which is in the back of our brain, which is where fight or flight, fear, and our emotional responses arise from. So when something happens and it creates a memory, it connects an emotional response to certain memories. And that's where we get things like post-traumatic stress disorder. It is an emotional response that's connected to a memory of something happening. It's also where we get anxiety and depression and those other things, because even if we're not quantifying some of our memories as necessitating the definition of post-traumatic stress, we still are doing things based off of how the brain has processed experiences historically and what we have learned from those. So within the hippocampus, we have that creation of memory, but we also have the largest amount of our brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that is what's really connected to that neuroplasticity aspect of the brain. And the receptor within the hippocampus, within the brain, that's also connected to the stimulation of that brain-derived neurotrophic factor, those effects for neuroplasticity, has a 1,000 times affinity for psilocybin over an SSRI. So by design, by natural design, our brain has an affinity for nature, and nature enhancing our memory and our brain's ability to create new thoughts and to have new awareness over anything chemical or man-made that we have up to this point in time. So I just think that's extremely powerful to break it down to some of that geeky science a little bit. So if we go back to feelings though, and not getting caught up in how the amygdala is responding with fight or flight, fear, and other emotional responses, and instead looking at what am I noticing in my thinking that is different? That's how we really find those benefits with psilocybin microdosing. So that neuroplasticity, that brain's ability to change, is something that develops over time, and that is really the benefit of long-term microdosing. So I know I took you guys down a simple thought into a kind of a complex idea, but it's very simple if we go back to that original concept. Thought is energy. The amount of time that we spend thinking about how we feel is being wasted because our focus should not be on how we feel. It should be on how is our thinking changing. And so psilocybin microdosing is about finding the dose that is helpful to you in, yes, alleviating some of the symptomology struggle of I feel anxious or I feel depressed, but really digging down underneath that to why? What's under that? Where are those feelings of anxiety or those feelings of depression or those feelings of negative self-talk or not being good enough or wishing somebody would respond to us differently? Where are those coming from? And that all is rooted in thought. So I'm going to pause on that and just give anyone in group an opportunity to provide their thoughts on that, maybe things that they've noticed or questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of have a question because it was recommended that I start taking sertraline for my OCD,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really want to, but I noticed that when I'm taking the microdosing, I don't have those intrusive thoughts.
Right.
So I'm thinking, of course, I don't want to tell my medical provider, not yet anyway. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Because I mean, they're very open-minded. They were very honest with me about the marijuana side of things and that they can't really endorse or, because of their federal things. But yeah, that's what I found is that when I am consistently microdosing every day, I do not have those intrusive thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
the OCD part of it. So I'm wondering, for people that have been taking sertraline or some other, things for OCD, have they been able to get off of the sertraline, or can I just not take that? I'd prefer not to if it's not going to, really help
Right.
like mushrooms are doing. So that's my question.
No, I appreciate the question because that's a real world application to the idea of thought right there. the way OCD is described is exactly what you said. It's intrusive thoughts. And those intrusive thoughts are what are the predicator to whatever the behaviors are that tend to go along with that. And sometimes it's not a behavior, sometimes it's just more thought. It's counting or it's repetition or it's something that makes the brain just kind of go around and around. It's not always, locking the front door 25 times or washing your hands. Those sometimes it shows up as behavioral and sometimes it shows up as more thought itself. But regardless, it's intrusive. And when we look at the brain and how it functions, we have either executive mode functioning or default mode functioning when we're conscious awake. So executive mode functioning means the prefrontal cortex is engaged. Prefrontal cortex is our focus, our creativity, our ability to be on one task and to pay attention to, one thing at a time. It's forward planning, goal setting. That's all executive functioning. I often will describe that as our adult ego state because executive functioning is not based on how we feel, whereas parent or child ego state is much more about, again, how do I feel about something? So it's non-emotional and it's kind of that survival and going forward mode. Um, just real quick, because I use the term survival, not survival in a fight or flight self-protective response, but survival in just here's what I'm doing and here are the things that I need to do. So a very conscious, active way. The other level of functioning is default mode functioning. Our default mode network by design is supposed to only be active when we're not focused on something else. So default mode is daydreaming, meditation, sitting out in nature and just enjoying that, not having any one specific thing that we're focused on. And it's, the mind wandering. The complicating factor happens when default mode is trying to be active at the same time that executive mode is. So consciously, we're saying, I'm sitting here at work, I'm trying to get this work done on my computer, and all I'm thinking about is how I can't believe my mom said that thing to me when I was 5, and I just can't seem to get it out of my head. And then, my friend also said the same thing, and there's probably something wrong with me. But what am I going to make for dinner? I got to stop eating so many carbs. These are the things, these are the rabbit holes that our brain will go down. And then what happens? 20 minutes later, we're staring at the computer screen, and either it's just one letter that's been pushed over and over and over. Now you have a whole line of G's, or nothing at all has really happened because your brain has just gone down the rabbit hole of all of these other thoughts. So when we get, and those are all thoughts that are annoying, but not incredibly intrusive per se. The intrusive thoughts end up being very negative. I have yet to have anyone tell me I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor, had our counseling practice for over 9 years now, and I worked with humans even prior to that in other aspects, just not licensed counseling. And to this point in life, I have never had somebody come to me and say, I just wish I could stop thinking about how awesome I am. I just think I'm amazing all the time. And, I'm so great. There's just butterflies floating around me everywhere I go. Nobody said that ever because that's not what our brain does. Our brain does not sit and think about how amazing and special we are, even though that's a true statement. Instead, it thinks about all of the messaging we've received in other ways. Because when we look at survival and being wired to survive as a natural being, survival is about not dying. Survival is not always about going forward, it is about not dying. So, to not die, we have to get along with everybody in our environment, especially today. We're no longer in these smaller communities where we just come together collectively. People have to like us. They have to like us on social media, or they have to like us enough to hire us, or they have to like us enough to be willing to do business with us or work with us in some capacity. And inside all of that term of liking comes the understanding that it's going through a filter of how we perceive that we think they perceive us. So if I'm talking to somebody, let's say Sally, I'm standing there thinking, wow, I wonder what Sally's thinking about me. And all Sally's thinking is, wow, I wonder what Charity's thinking about me. And so we sit in this transactional space of trying to measure what the other person might be thinking about us so that we can decide how we need to shift ourselves in order to be accepted by them. And that is where a lot of these obsessive and compulsive types of thoughts come from. They are rooted in a fear of not being accepted, not being good enough, not being chosen, not being worthy of whatever it is that the goal is. And so, therefore, at a basic, natural, foundational level, the concern is death, not surviving. So, what do I need to do? Well, now I need to control everything. That becomes the choice of if I don't know what someone else is thinking or how this is going to turn out, then I'm just going to try and control it because then at least I feel like I have an action oriented in that. And so the control becomes either doing a behavior over and over, or it becomes sitting and thinking about something to a point of what we call rumination, where it's just an incessant thought cycle that's happening. Again, typically negative. Or it becomes counting, which is the mind's way of distracting itself from the fear. You know, how many steps, how many scratches on the paper, how many times have I hit this certain letter, how many street signs have I passed? These types of counting behaviors are some of the most common, obsessive or compulsive types of thoughts that happen. So within that, to go back to the original question, psilocybin is helpful because it quiets the default mode network. The default mode network not being distracting anymore allows the individual to be in that executive functioning mode and just show up in the things that they want to show up in and be less focused on all of the distracting thoughts. So that's really where the benefit is. It also reduces blood flow to the amygdala, psilocybin does. So by reducing blood flow to the amygdala, it moves us out of that fight or flight feeling that we can be in, which again, we're not always thinking that, but it is that hypervigilant state that physiologically shows up generally as higher blood pressure, higher heart rate, a little bit of a foggy brain. Those are all things that we're going to generally call anxiety. And so that anxious feeling is quieted down because of reduced blood flow to the amygdala. And psilocybin stimulates the prefrontal cortex. So back to that executive functioning, now we have a stimulation of the executive functioning, a reduction of blood flow, so a quieting to the emotional part of the brain, and also a quieting to all of that inner chatter and that default mode way of thinking. And that's really where those benefits then come from for individuals struggling with OCD. Also, similarly to that, ADD or ADHD. Those can have a similar feeling to them and how someone's showing up, just not attached to the compulsions and the obsessive thinking that goes with it. But that inability to shut the brain down or to quiet is in that same family. So I hope that helps answer the question a little bit about, how is it helpful and how is it different from sertraline?
Yeah, that could be, so that could be, there might be some similarities. Is that what you're saying? There might be some similarities with ADHD, but not necessarily, because I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I've been accused of, but it could be just the OCD part of it that's similar to ADHD, right? Those could be separate things, right?
Yes, and I hate I use those terms just because within society we all have a general understanding of what those terms mean. And we look at a diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder, or a diagnosis of ADHD, a diagnosis of depression. Those terms were created for clinicians to be able to have conversations between themselves without going through and describing all the symptoms again. Well, I have a patient who has high blood pressure, they have difficulty focusing, constantly can't sit still, squirrel brain, so to speak. Oh, okay, yeah, I have that too. Instead, they just say, I have a client that has ADHD.
Got
So
it.
the similarities of symptoms can be very similar. And there's a lot of what I'm going to call misdiagnosis out there, not because I'm a judgy clinician, but just because as clinicians, we're put in a place often of putting a label onto something because that's what insurance billing requires. And so a label is chosen based off the information that a client or patient presents with at that point in time and however they choose to describe it. And yes, there are some assessments out there that have been designed to help, mediate some of that potential misdiagnosis. But regardless, if we move away from all the diagnosis labels and just look at what are the struggles that you're having on a daily basis and why are those there, that's where the neuroscience, I think, can become really helpful instead of having a label on it. So to take that shift to your question specific to OCD, it's are those specific ways of thinking leading to compulsive behaviors or compulsive thoughts, because of the intrusive thoughts themselves. And so that's where that next label would come from of, okay, we're going to call that OCD. But the idea or the premise is the same in getting the brain to quiet down and be able to focus on something specifically. So. Any other questions that have kind of come up to this at this point, or any other thoughts on the, recognition that thought itself requires energy, and a lot of energy is spent thinking about how we feel versus what are we noticing, and how psilocybin is helpful in being able to bring new awareness to what we're noticing.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
We have said already, so I apologize if I didn't hear, but so that's my absolute favorite thing is the quieting of that involved. So, but my question is that it really gets quiet while I'm using psilocybin. And will it ever, like, in it, so I understand we can learn new ways and growing, and I know it's a science word, but for us, I guess, like, carry that when the psilocybin isn't most active in our brain. Like, am I saying, you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I do, but Nicole, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. It sounds like you're in a hallway or a tunnel.
okay, I'm going to go in the room because I have it on speaker, so hopefully anybody can hear.
Okay. I always want to make sure we can hear the question fully.
Okay, I apologize. I had it on the Bluetooth speaker so that both Lloyd and I could hear.
Oh, good.
My question was about the default and the quieting. I definitely feel it while I'm on psilocybin, so like when it's most active in my brain. But I do understand you're saying like it creates new neural connections and stuff. And so is that something that will, like, if we literally grow the new thoughts, that will kind of dissipate, like, and disappear throughout the rest of the day? Because you know how like the half-life and this and that. So I'm just wondering, like, because I do feel it when I do, use the psilocybin way more when it's, active, I
Mhm.
guess is my question. So is it something that will eventually be quieted permanently, or like, like, is it something that we can train our brain not to do without needing the psilocybin? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't plan on quitting anytime soon, but I don't even know how I'm wording this question, but I think you get what I'm saying.
I know exactly. Yes, I hear your
Okay.
question in all the words.
Okay.
I
Okay.
got
Thank you.
you. Yeah, so my takeaway from the question is basically, do I have to microdose psilocybin forever in order to maintain these continued benefits of having a quieter mind? And the answer to that is not necessarily, but certain individuals may decide to. So the goal with changing the way that we think, when we look at neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to think differently, let's go back to day one, the very first time you ever started using psilocybin, and let's say within that first 30 days. Um, there's a lot to be noticed. Oh, wow, there's all these benefits. Things are changing. I'm noticing them differently. My brain's a little quieter. Well, over time, that is going to become our new norm. That is going to become the reference point. Initially, our reference point is how we are when we start microdosing. So let's kind of use the analogy of losing weight. When somebody first decides they want to lose weight, then let's say they want to lose 100 pounds. All right, well, day one is the hardest. That's when your body starts shifting a lot initially in that first 30 days. You're exercising more, you're eating differently, you're cutting out certain things. There's a lot of emotional part that goes into that. Everything feels really hard, but the body shows some pretty quick progress because it's really kind of shocking the system and something completely different. Well, 6 months down the road, when you've lost 50 pounds and you still have 50 pounds to go, now you're still being consistent with some of the behaviors that you were doing before, but you're noticing that other things are a little more challenging. Well, now I've got to figure out how to tone the muscle. Now I've got to figure out how to tighten the skin. Now I want to focus on, you know, increasing the amount of weight that I'm lifting. It's not always just about that initial weight loss. So changing our thinking is very similar to that, in that we're going to have things that happen initially that are very noticeable, but then our reference point is going to shift because that becomes the new norm. That doesn't mean, well, now I'm still microdosing because I'm still, to use a term that people often say, I still have broken thinking. No, first of all, your thinking wasn't broken before. You were just in survival mode. We're moving out of survival mode and into a new way of thriving and actually living in a daily basis. So then the reference point is, how am I going to continue going forward with this? How does my thinking continue to shift? If you look back over some of the things that you would have done or ways that you would have responded to situations 6 months ago at the beginning of microdosing versus how you respond to them or notice them now, you will likely see a pretty dramatic shift in that. But it's not until we really look retrospectively that we notice that, because we're just continuing to live our life. Well, yeah, of course I think that way. That just makes sense now. Well, of course I don't emotionally over respond to these little thoughts and comments anymore. That didn't serve me, didn't give me the relationships that I was wanting or looking for. I didn't feel good about how I was showing up in certain ways. So as we continue to use psilocybin, again, we go back to neuroplasticity develops over time. That is the benefit of the long-term microdosing. And that is why microdosing over just big, large dose ceremonies has a much more extended healing aspect and a much longer term true healing benefit to it. Not that benefit can't be gained from getting new perspective and having new awareness with those major serotonin disruptions every now and then and seeing things a little bit differently, but microdosing is going to maintain that, and it's really going to be what creates that healing over time. As our thinking continues to shift, then that becomes the new norm. So the time will come that it's not where you feel like you need to microdose every day. Notice I use that word feel again. You listen to your body, you notice how you're responding, you notice the days that your brain says, hey, today I could use a little bit of a boost. I actually yesterday did a microdose. Just to do it, didn't necessarily feel like, oh, I want to or whatever. Just we have a new strain that we've been working with, and so I've been trying it out and I like it. And so I microdosed yesterday, and about 2 hours or so into my day, I said to one of our colleagues here in the office, I said, man, I feel a little weird. It was like my brain was saying, we didn't really need that today. I'm not sure what your goal was. I mean, you're welcome for being so focused for, the appointment that you had in the morning, but now it was a little bit much. And that was after the half-life. Half-life of psilocybin is 2 hours and 43 minutes. So this was a good about 2 to 3 hours into the day, well, 2 hours at least into the day. So I was at that reduced dose really of the active ingredient from the microdose, but that was when I noticed that I just was a little off. My brain felt a little bit foggy and just like it wasn't truly focused. So my takeaway from that is, okay, I'm not going to microdose tomorrow. So I didn't microdose today, and my brain is just fine unless I get emails or text messages from you guys afterward that says you were weird today, then I'll know. But that's where I say listen to your body. You will notice when you're ready to kind of take breaks or when you want to reduce the dose. Your brain will tell you. And there's a huge benefit to that because we learn to trust our natural self. Again, we've been trained that so often we should be looking to other people to say, hey, do you think I'm okay? Hey, do you think I'm smart? Do you think I'm worthwhile? Do you think I'm valuable? Am I worth spending time with? And we make adjustments in ourself and then how we think about ourselves based off of how other people are responding to us. But they're doing the same thing. Hey, do you think I'm okay? Do you think I'm respectable? Do you think I'm worth being admired? Do you consider me successful? All these terms and definitions that we're measuring by. So when we quiet those down, and that's a lot of what we're doing in quieting the default mode network is all that inner chatter, all that noise, quieting that down, we are less focused on ourself and the idea of ourself and what we think other people might be thinking about us. And when we show up in that way, other people are free to be who they are too. They don't have to have all their self-protective armor on when they're interacting with us. So to go back to your question of do you have to microdose forever to continue getting these benefits? It's listen to your body. The longer that you microdose and really see those thoughts changing, the way that you show up every day changing, the way that you're thinking changing, you will decide how to moderate. Do I want to reduce my dose? Do I want to skip a day here and there? Maybe I do, just to kind of notice that, wow, look at these things that I'm still responding to in this new way. But remember, our reference point continues to change. We are not trying to achieve the point of self-actualization. For those of you that have ever, read about or studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're not trying to get to that self-actualization point of having no need and being this perfect human. There is no such thing. We don't, what does that even mean, a perfect human? I just say that and everybody's going to have a different idea of what that means. What we are striving to get to is a place of having a quieter mind so we're not so caught up in all the noise that's around us, and instead we're able to think clearly, to focus, to be present, and to show up authentically in our everyday lives within the societies that we live in, recognizing that if we were in a different society, there would be different definitions and different expectations. So hopefully that helps answer that question with the neuroplasticity a little bit. It is continued growth, but it is also recognizing that our reference point for ourself and our thinking changes. What else has come to mind for you guys? What kind of has come to mind in thinking about the understanding that we spend a lot of energy, that we have limited energy. When we wake up in the morning, you have limited energy resources. Sometimes we use part of that to go to the gym, we use part of it to think, we use part of it to interact with other people, to drive. So energy is being utilized throughout the day. How much of that energy is being spent on this emotional idea of the self and how we show up? And where has maybe some of your thinking shifted away from so much about how do I feel and more toward what am I noticing?
I would say when I hear that about what am I noticing, I think part of my thinking is shifted to outcomes. Yeah, focusing on what do I need to do for the outcome that I'm after, and not like it's guaranteed, not like I'm just declaring and gonna do it, but like holding it out, be like, what would I have to do for it to be possible? Like for even just to bring it into view, right? Bring it into, and then just doing those things, whether I want to or not, want to or how I feel. And at times, it's very uncomfortable. But yeah, I would say that's been a maybe an executive function that's shifted for me or in progress of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I think when we look at what do we want for our lives, that's a question that we don't always have an answer to or that we even have necessarily thought about. We set these goals of, oh, I want to be married, or I want to make a certain amount of money, or I want to have a certain title at my career, or I want to live in a certain place or travel. We kind of set these types of goals, but we don't necessarily give consideration to the fact of why do we want those things? Where has the idea even come from to say that is something that I want or that I think I should want or have been told that I should want?
Yeah. I'm thinking of an example here not too long ago. I had every intention of moving to another country. I had everything set to go. I was, my lease was up. I had the money set aside. Was going to put everything in storage. I had a big sale. And I don't know, during the shrooms really helped me to get in touch with what I was really feeling underneath of all this planning. And when it came down to it, I was like, I don't want to do this. I am not ready. I'm not ready physically emotionally, whatever, spiritually, to deal with this again, because I've lived outside of the country once and everything was all set up before I went there. But yeah, my executive reasoning really helped me, the planning part of it, but then getting in touch with the underlying feelings was more important, and not necessarily feeling, but facing a fear. I, and it was just really helpful at that time because I remember that was when I was double dosing, because it really helped me to understand. I said, I'm feeling something I haven't felt before, and it was like, okay, I really don't want to do this. And as soon as I made the decision not to, and sort of relaxed into staying put and just kind of maybe giving it another year
Mhm.
before so I can be ready, that really helped me to relax. And yeah, so I mean, I don't know if that is, but that's how I'm applying what you were talking about, because being able to have the heart and mind experience together to make a decision is really important. So
Absolutely. Do you, in kind of pushing that a little bit more, are you comfortable in sharing maybe some of the thoughts that came to mind for you that helped you recognize where there was some other thinking that was maybe pushing towards that? You mentioned the word fear. Anything you feel open to elaborating on that there?
yeah, that was it, because I was operating on this, the present climate in the country, et cetera, and it's still there. It's still very much a part of my wanting to, you know, but also that underlying fear of, oh my God, I've got to change. Everything has to change. My dog, I'm going to have to do something about my dog. I'm going to sell my car, blah, blah, blah. All these things. That wasn't so much the bother, but it was like, I'm not ready to move lock, stock, and barrel 100% over to another country. I'm just not physically ready. Because I noticed I was doing things to delay,
Mm.
and I said, okay, why am I doing that? I was like, I was putting it off getting my passport, even though I knew I had the money. There was just a lot of things that played into that I noticed, oh man, I'm delaying doing things. And I was facing it, but it was like a big move like that I couldn't do. I
Mhm.
was not ready for, just like before I had my surgery. Same thing. I had to prep for 3 years before I had that surgery because I didn't want to do it. So yeah, facing that side, but I think preparing your mind, I think there's a huge work involved in preparing your mind for something, a major change like that, that I needed.
Mhm.
So yeah, maybe dialing down all the negativity, the negative side of it, and being able to deal with each one of those dials, and okay, I've got that set, I've got that set, I've got that set, now I'm ready.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's kind of it. And
Yep.
since I'm doing it alone,
Mhm.
there's also that.
Yeah.
So that's scary. It's just launching out into something unknown and new,
Mhm.
even though I've done it before, but still, this is a major, anyway, I don't know if I'm making any sense. Sorry.
Yes, no, you completely are making sense. Yeah, one thing that I kind of hear you saying underneath that too is really putting recognition on why it felt like there was such a rush. And the rush was because of these things that are existing in external society that you don't have any control over. And so for you, it was this feeling of control to, well, I don't have to stay in this system anymore. I can just go to a different system. But potentially reflecting on that a little bit and recognizing that's not necessarily the answer to what I need long term.
That's right, and it could be worse. It could be a worse situation. I could be walking into something that might be. It's the unknown factors that can come up no matter where you are in this world. You're not going to run away from your problems. That's for sure. So
Well, I say no matter where you go, you take your brain with you. You know, you might look out a different window and smell some different air and eat some different food and have a different political system that you're under, but your brain is the same no matter where you go. And we can spend a lot of time really trying to cover that. And then really, that's what happens when we get focused so much on how do we feel. because those feelings are so fickle and they are dependent on so many things. I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that lives in America today, which is where, we're based with this group, that doesn't have some sort of societal stressor that they're experiencing because of the unknown. But if we really think about it, everything in life is unknown. We don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, much less 5 weeks, 5 months or 5 years or 50 years down the road. So all we can do is take the information that we have now and make the best decisions that we can, or the healthiest decisions that we can. And we do that in a financial level, in a personal health level, a mental health level, relational level. But one thing that we as humans often get caught up in, that you know we have a big tree in our backyard, and there's a lot of squirrels that run around in this tree, and we enjoy just kind of watching them, chase each other around and be playful and also fight, and just seeing nature in its finest form. But I have yet to watch the squirrels and think, boy, I bet that squirrel is sitting there and thinking about all of its regrets, that it should have done this, and if only it picked the other squirrel to mate with, or a different tree to live in, or it's a different place to put its nuts. You know, I don't think that's happening with the squirrels. I don't think that in nature, other species are sitting around thinking about all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and how if only their mom or dad had treated them differently, that they would have had a different outcome in their life. No, humans do that. Humans like to say, if only this had happened, or if only that had happened, or, shoulda, coulda, woulda about the past and what if about the future. And that's where that default mode network becomes so overactive, because we spend so much time slash energy in those ways of thinking. Now, that is not to say that those particular things have not impacted us, but we put so much into reflecting on those, and digging into our childhood, and what about this and what about that. And I am in no way invalidating the experiences that people go through. I hear about them every day. I work with people who have had extremely traumatic and impressionable experiences happen to them, but the goal is always the same. The goal is, how do we separate the emotional messaging of that experience from the memory of the fact that it happened? And you guys have heard me say before, we don't do frontal lobotomies these days. We're not going to forget. So that memory is still going to be there, but we can remember it and feel less. That is possible. And that's really what healing is. And that is a huge part of neuroplasticity too, is not staying stuck on, because this happened, therefore I am this, or this. And that's another reason that, within this group, we do a lot of work in removing labels, and the expectation of, I put this label on myself, or a clinician put this label on me, and now therefore here I am as this person, or as this label.
That's another thing. You bring up a very interesting point about when we do get triggered. I notice that when I have been getting triggered and I'm on mushrooms, I am able to weather that so much better now. I mean, I just, like you said, it's like I feel it and I let it go. It's gone. It's like literally water under the bridge again. And it's like I'm not having a the full trigger response I used to, whereas in my body, because there is that self-regulation going on. And I think that's a really, really helpful side of what psilocybin does for a PTSD experience, like a triggering moment like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That is a huge part of how we heal. Healing is no longer being subject to or victim to that negative internal messaging that we've taken on for so long because of past experiences. And when we can get out of the space of shame and regret and guilt, none of which serve us, then we give ourselves the freedom to go forward and live in a different way. And, just like someone previously mentioned, and being able to make more decisions, and what kind of life do I want? And moving towards the things that we want, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when everything within us is like, oh, I don't like this at all. It doesn't matter how you feel about it because you've made a decision on what direction you want to go and why you want to go there. And that goes back to that underlying idea of the definitions that we're given. If we say to be successful or to be a valuable human, you have to be successful. Then A, we have to quantify and define what does it mean to be a valuable human, and then B, we have to quantify and define what it means to be successful. And that's a very different definition uh, across each state within the United States, and certainly across the world, and across different religious belief systems, community belief systems, cultural belief systems. That idea of what is successful varies. So instead, we have been given a definition for it, and then we hold on to that and say, well, I have to do this. I have to have a bank account that looks like, Elon Musk's bank account in order to be what I call successful. Well, I bet Elon Musk would be happy to tell you about some of the struggles that go along with having that bank account. And it's not to say, well, yeah, I'll take the problems of being a multi-billionaire over the problems of having, being on the welfare system. We're not, again, quantifying those particular things, but why do you want the money? Why do you want to live in another country? Why do you want to have a certain type of car, a certain level of education? How does that actually serve you in what you want for your life? If our goal is a quieter mind and a more natural state of being, let's just consider for a moment all the things that we throw onto our lives out of choice. And then we're like, well, man, I can't believe I don't have a quieter mind. Well, you're wearing a watch that vibrates every time you get a social media message or a calendar alert, not to mention the phone itself also making some noise, and maybe your iPad if that's also connected. So now for every one notification, you've got three things dinging and vibrating. Nothing against Apple. It's great to have those tools, but they are tools. But when we become a slave to our tools because we think we're supposed to be showing up in a certain way or responding in a certain way, that is a self-imposed slavery of the mind. And we spend a lot of our energy being irritated about how much self-imposed slavery of the mind we have created and wanting to blame society and blame somebody else for it. So choose different. Think differently. But to get out of that perspective and to have a more open perspective, whether it's about, a life-changing decision you want to make or a goal you have for the future of your life, you have to quiet the noise that's there. We're not looking for a silent mind. Nature is not silent. The wind in the trees, the water flowing, the animals and the noises that they make. Nature in itself is not silent. We're not trying to achieve silence. We're trying to quiet external noise that is unnecessary and does not lead us to the life that we want. So step back from how do I feel about everything? We're trying to cover feelings. I feel uncomfortable, so now I need to go do something else to cover it. Psilocybin microdosing is not about covering. Psilocybin microdosing is about being honest with yourself and about the way that you think and why we're responding and doing the things that we do, and be willing to, in those moments, say, this is not comfortable. This is not what I feel like I want to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. Why? Because it aligns with the life that I want. It aligns with the person that I want to be. It aligns with how I want other people to feel in my presence. Want you to feel relaxed, show up as yourself, not have to have all these pretenses.
I like that you said that because I really feel like I'm finally at the wheel of my own. This is the first time in my life I felt like I am at, it's not about control even. It's just about staying in my body. And I really appreciate that you said that. Thank you so much because that really is very freeing.
That's it. Freedom for yourself. Freedom to be who you want to be. Show up what's authentic to you. Any other comments or thoughts today as we're getting into the last 10 minutes or so of group? Any questions anybody brought to group specific to their microdosing dosage today, or their regimen, or even just reflection in general on some things that may have come up in today's discussion?
going to the B plus, would you say this to start with the same dose?
Yes, B plus is very similar to Golden Teacher as far as its potency of psilocybin and psilocin content. So I would say start with that same dosage, and then you can just slowly make those adjustments over time, increasing each day if you want to, till you're getting to what your current dose is. Maybe even drop down a little bit of a dose. How much are you using right now on a daily basis?
What's a scoop again? Sorry.
Yeah, a scoop is 50 milligrams of the dry powder.
Okay, so like 150 to
Okay.
200.
Perfect. So I would say maybe start with 2 scoops. Do start with 100 milligrams or zero point 0.1 of a gram and just see what you notice with that, because you may find that even reducing the dose a little bit with a different strain, you're still getting the same benefit for you. But of course, then feel free to increase it as on each day you can increase by that extra little scoop if you want to, but find that dose that you feel like is helpful to you. So, but similar in potency, yes. So I would just say when it's something new, let's drop it back just a bit, and then you can build it back up, see where you land.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions or comments for today's group? Well, I appreciate everyone being here. Even for those of you that didn't join in discussion, I hope that you were able to take away what you needed today. For those of you that did contribute, thank you so much for your questions and your contributions. It's so valuable to have everybody here and showing up and being able to have these open discussions that give us a chance to really notice how our thinking is changing and how we are moving more and shifting with those neuroplasticity benefits and being able to get the benefits of the long-term microdosing. And for those of you that are just getting started, to stay consistent with that dosing on a daily basis. Remember, the body does not build up a tolerance to psilocybin when microdosing. You can dose every single day. Listen to your body. Pay attention to how you're responding to it. And if you have questions, reach out to the office through text, through email, whatever works best for you. We are happy to answer questions. We do that 7 days a week. So stay in touch with us, and otherwise go and have a great rest of your week. Thank you, everybody.